This is a short video that we put together. My dear friend Gene Chrissy has donated his time over the last 8 years to try and tell this story. We've got nearly 9 to 10 hours of video we've tried to compress to something like 50 minutes to an hour so that we don't lose your interest. The story begins October 2nd, 1928, when the pilot Grant Donaldson was northbound from Medford, Oregon, destined for Portland, Oregon, with a single passenger on board, R.A. Donovan. Slightly more than an hour north of Medford after departure and low ceiling and visibility, they crashed 8 miles south of Canyonville, Oregon, by hitting a mountain. And the crash report says that they hit trees and clipped treetops for nearly a quarter of a mile before the airplane pulled into the hill and burned. The passenger, Donovan, was killed. Donaldson survived, spent a year in Harborview in Seattle recovering from his burns, never to fly again, but then to eventually end up working for United Airlines as a weather observer and station manager. At the time, he worked for Pacific Air Transport, a division of Boeing Lines, which later on became a part of United Airlines in the early 1930s. Donovan was a diamond dealer, owned drugstores up and down the West Coast. The diamonds, what was left of poor Donovan and the engine was left at the crash site for about 24 hours when the airline salvaged what they could and then abandoned the airplane. It was salvaged in the early 90s by the Oregon Aviation Historical Society, a man named Ron Bartley. And Wendy and I were able to acquire the airplane from the Oregon Aviation Historical Society in 2000 with the idea of bringing the airplane to Spokane and restoring it. The airplane, as it stands today, carries 50 to 70 components from the original airplane, the original data plate, title, and of course the story. As I climb in the back cockpit, I step on the original step that Donaldson stepped on. As I reach for the handheld, that's the original step, the wobble pump, the fuel selector, a number of components as I move my way around the cockpit take me back to that morning. The Boeing 40 project's a 25-year dream that's been realized. We began the restoration project, and over the course of the last 8 years and 18,000 hours, with the help of 61 volunteers, we've arrived at where we are today with a flying airplane that we'll see described. We've got a couple of snippets or clips over the last 8 videos, which kind of bring you up to speed with regards to the project. I want to cite a couple people who have been significant in the project. Matt Burrows, who built our fuselage, John Bevan, our very first volunteer, who virtually did not miss a Wednesday night for 8 years, Jim Miller, who did all of our paint work, a lot of our sheet metal work, built my doors, Ray Glidden, all the systems, engine controls, fuel lines, wiring, etc., Art Swenson, who finished our wings for us, a beautiful artisan with regards to woodwork. Randy Ingram turned out to be a real tiger the last 3 years. Painting skills, sheet metal skills. He and my son Ryan developed a real synergy. Basically did all of the sheet metal on this airplane, all the fitting. Primarily, Randy was responsible for all the firewall forward around the cylinders, nose bowl fitting, cowl flaps, etc. His dad was very helpful. My son Ryan, of course, who grew up with this project over 8 years and was relentless throughout the entire effort. My beautiful wife Wendy, who covered the airplane with an excess of 1,000 hours of effort with just regards to installing the fabric and rib stitching and getting the airplane ready for the paint booth, which turned out to be a mammoth effort with regards to Randy and myself. Patrick Rouse early on spent the first 2 years with us working on control systems, the fin attached, all the stringers and basic fuselage outline and design. Ernie Buckler did a lot of our AutoCAD work and initial welding on the fuselage for us. And finally, John Kennard that built our wing ribs before the wings went finally to final assembly. So work with us here over the next 50 minutes or so. We're going to take you through a couple segments, through the initial ground run, through the first test flight, and then a wonderful program that was done here in Spokane by a local broadcasting station, our PBS station, Channel 7, with a program Northwest Profile. So enjoy this, do what you like, and share a little bit of fun and history with us. Thank you for the interest, and the Boeing will hopefully come to an airport near you.
1938, the whole country united in celebrating Airmail Week, while airliners winged high over the cities. During the celebration, a 10-year-old Boeing 40 was given to Henry Ford as an addition to his Museum of Americana. Incidentally, the plane was flown to Detroit by Jack Knight.
This is Matt Burrows, my dear friend, who's constructed this beautiful fuselage for us. And what happened this morning, Matt?
Well, the dentist called me up and said, we need one of your wisdom teeth. Somebody needed one, so they took one of mine this morning.
So you're running with less wisdom than you normally have, is that right?
I'm at 75% power.
75%
power.
Before we get into the airplane briefly, pull out of your jacket, which you brought along here, and describe what this is. This is pretty amazing.
I have family that worked for Boeing beginning in 1916. This belonged to a first cousin of mine, twice removed. And this slide rule actually had a part in the designing of this aircraft.
So that's the slide rule that was used by Lewis Marsh while working for Bill Boeing in the 1920s, was directly involved with the design work of this airplane. So the numbers that calculated this, for instance, the 749-pound cargo load in the mail pit probably came off of that number, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of crazy. We don't know why it's 750, but it's 749.
We're working on a field approval for 7.
Yeah, we're going to upgrade the cargo capacity. We have 337s, so we're going to run 750 pounds,
there you
God
go.
willing.
There you go.
In the winter of 2000,
2000.
December
7th.
Pearl Harbor Day,
Yeah.
Dave Holmes and I drove up to your house with $2,400 worth of chromoly tubing, an engine mount, and 60 pounds or so of water jet fittings. Does that sound pretty accurate?
Yeah, pretty accurate. It was. I refer to it as the Boeing 40C kit.
The kit.
Yeah.
The
kit arrived that day.
And this came too, right? This was this is what Matt had to work from, and these are they're in here. These are all the original microfiche drawings which Matt had to work from. So we drop a bunch of tubing off, and in just a minute, describe the task. I mean, this is a huge task. We've got a engine mount defined and a tail post, and you've got to connect all the dots. So take a second here.
Probably the first thing is you've just told one of your best friends, Addison, that you can do this project.
Yeah.
And now it's sitting there waiting for you.
But you got a pretty good track record.
Yeah, I built a few airplanes. The first thing that you have to do is establish a datum to measure everything off of. You definitely want the front end of the airplane to line up with the back end of the airplane. And it's always easier to build parts for an airplane that's straight. So using the mount ring that you brought me, first thing I did was set that up on my 33.5-foot table to start the airplane. And then at the other end of the table, which was almost the full length of my shop, I established the tail post and then started measuring everything off of that, and within minutes we had a fuselage sitting there.
Yeah, right, okay, minutes,
Yeah.
So you got 2 points to find.
I got 2 points to find, and the reason I did it that way is because you don't have a multiplication of errors when you're measuring off a center line, where if you started at one end and added them all up, you could, if you're off a 16th or off 10 thousandths, it's going to multiply as you
cumulative.
Yeah, as you got through the building process. If you remember, the first thing we did before the tubing even arrived up there is you had these big 1 5/8 longeron sections, and I welded all the gear fittings onto that. And then I'd made up a fixture that would position all the gear fittings and the wing attach fittings on that table. So I had a really good starting base there to work in the cabin section of the aircraft.
Okay, so that defines where the wings and the gear bolt on. And now you've got to begin this process of establishing each bay. And that's used, what, close to probably 250 feet of 2-inch square tubing to weld kind of a internal skeleton to define all those points.
Yeah, I used an exoskeleton type fixture on the project because it's a lot easier to build the outside limitations of the fuselage and then build inside that than it is to build an inside type fixture and put everything on the outside of it.
Well, that worked well.
Yeah, it worked better than I thought it would.
Then you had a target. We had a 60 thou hole drilled in the engine mount datum and a string that you referenced, what, in every axis as you worked your way back?
Then I had a couple of my two younger sons were out there, and I had to keep checking the string to make sure that.
Yeah, that worked. In fact, tell him what your son Michael said. You were in this thing, what, 2 or 3 months, and he realized that you were building
An airplane.
an airplane.
Yeah. It's like,
I mean, he's in there playing every night. You know,
he thinks Dad's just playing too. Well, it was a lot of fun. But,
oh, look, he can make pretty lights and fun grinding noises and stuff. One thing you need to appreciate is how fast Matt fits tubing. I mean, most of us go to a piece of chromoly tube and we grind for a while and it doesn't fit. About 3 tubes later, in an hour, we get it. Well, Matt takes a pair of tin snips and by eye, and he strikes a line down the perimeter of the tube and works relative to that line. And you fit tubes typically in 3 or 4 minutes, which is pretty amazing. Anyway, I envy that. Respect it, but envy it.
Well, it's I'd worked for a modification company that for several years and just did production,
Fitting and
prototype work, stuff like that. So
we found a program off the internet recently where you can actually take 2 different tube diameters and define the intersection angle, and it plots out for you on your printer the profile, which you tape on the tube. And
I just fit 2 tubes while you were talking.
I got to use this funky thing and trim. Yeah, Matt does that while I get my thing, but it's anyway, it's kind of cute. And then we go through this welding process, which in its own can be deforming.
Yeah,
if
you
you're not
have-
careful where the heat goes.
With the fitting is real important because if you don't fit tubes close, you're going to have a lot of shrinkage, a lot of contraction that will actually make a very crooked airframe. If you've been to any fly-ins, you'll see a few out there that are
Kind of wiggly.
wiggly's a good word.
we don't have
Wiggly's a
wiggly.
good word. Also, in the building the fuselage, this airplane, even though it's fairly flat-sided, it's got some pretty neat lines to the fuselage, and it was a challenge to keep all those nice curves in it. It's going to get all covered up with fabric, but
The fact is the airplane is made up of relatively rectangular bays connected between the dots, but Matt's managed to get a very nice curved transition between them. So it's not a faceted connect the dot airplane, it's kind of a curvy, girly thing, which is kind of neat,
yeah.
which is just beautiful to look at. The other thing, if we want to touch on just briefly, we did a lot of reading about having to preheat chromoly tubing before welding and then post annealing. And that really isn't a big deal with thin tube, is that right?
Yeah, not really. I did production motor mount work for a lot of years, and as you're welding the material, you can tell how the heat dissipation is and things like that on the tubing. And if you run into a section where you need to preheat, it pretty much talks to you. I speak 4130 and
You speak 4130?
several other languages.
And several
so,
different
yeah.
alloy, no, not alloy, in, let's see, hardness dialects.
Yeah.
But what we find out, or through all our reading and such, with the 049 wall, the heat can penetrate quickly enough so you don't have a real bad heat affected zone. Anything over about 125, we did heat some of the big heavy parts before they were pre-welded.
Herky Bay was...
Herky Bay, that's this wire braced bay up here in the front with 1/2 inch and 9/16 cross brace wires. And what, that carry through spar is 125 inch and whatever.
It's 2 inch and it's 125 wall.
Yeah, 2 inch 125 wall chromoly, which is pretty amazing. I could talk to Matt during the course of this December to May time period. That's December 2000 to May 2001. And I could talk about any station, and we instantly knew what fitting and where he was at. It was kind of fun. Well, I'm in station 4, left-hand up corner wing fitting, and oh yeah, that's the one. Anyway, it was really wonderful. In May of 2001, we lifted the fuselage from the jig and set it back down, and were able to push the wing bolts in by hand. Last night, we finished tramming the airplane. We did this with a laser and confirmed it by cross-checking between the wing fittings in each of the bays. And
Does it look like it's going to work?
it works awesome. Good. I mean, it's so good. We really appreciate what we have now 2 years down the line. I mean, you really don't know what you got when it first comes out, other than we had confidence in you. Mm-hmm. But here we are. I'm back setting the trim reference, and the drawing says that 6 inches and 250 thousandths from this hole center is where the trim pivot is. And I have to get my calipers out, and I measure this datum with a dowel pin in the hole, and I'm within 15 thousandths. And I called you that night, remember? And I go, I can't believe how good this thing is. It's unbelievable. Everything we reference from the drawings, I think we're within 30 thousandths. I mean, I think that's very true.
I think I told you the first airplane I built, it was a little bit off.
Yes?
I think it was like 1972. I was in high school. And from then on, you realize if something's a little bit off, everything else has to
You
compensate
gotta make all your
for
parts
it. So,
screwed up from then on.
So from then on, I build them straight.
So anyway, I wanted you to meet Matt Burrows. He's a key part of the project. You're going to meet all the other players as the next years go on. This was part of document and everything. So I appreciate being a part of this. It's wonderful that we get to get you on celluloid.
Had to be done.
All right, Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
This is John Bevan, and John's an engineer here in town, and he has the old airplane disease as well. And he's been helping us for
3 years.
3 years now. John's been very talented with a lot of sheet metal work. He did the chines along the top of the longerons.
Yeah, all the chines and some of the top and some of the doors. And
A lot of the door, and the doors have been very challenging. We're in the doors almost a year with Jim Miller.
yeah.
And
Well,
you're
working with Miller's hard.
Yeah, Miller's hard. Yeah, he's a tough act. And the big project now is this writing table inside. Tell him a little bit about our mahogany nightmares as of late.
Well, it's, I think, we've done it 3 times.
Done it 3 times. We did. What do we have?
Somebody keeps buying the wrong wood.
Yeah, we've learned. Yeah, you don't use Philippine mahogany. We learned that because it warps like no tomorrow. And Honduran was what ended up working.
Right.
So we finally got all that done with all this brass hardware. And as you sit in the front seat, there's this writing table that's going to have the Boeing logo laser etched into the face of that door. All the way up there, that's got to support, oh, there you go. And open the mail pit for us. And this will lift right up. And you can see that thing is just huge. That mail pit holds 750 pounds. And the idea is with John standing up there, we throw mail sacks up to him and he loads the mail pit. So this is my son Ryan did all this. There's quite a bit of structure involved in supporting all those loads. I mean, potentially you've got myself at 125 pounds, and John, you're what, at 112, one at 110. And then you got these mail sacks that are hundreds of pounds, have to support all that load. So throw the mail pit closed, and we'll fold this door up. The badge here on the side is period. These airplanes operated in conjunction with the American Railway Express Agency. The idea being that when the weather was bad, the mail had to travel by railroad. Virtually this landing gear was scratch built, which led us with one technical problem trying to find a source for this 4-inch 070 streamlined tubing. Many years ago, we'd been down at Moose Creek on the Middle Fork and found a Fairchild 71 crash site. And from memory, I could remember that this airplane had some very heavy wing struts on it. And last September, we took the 185 and we hiked to the crash site, and lo and behold, the wing struts that were at this crash site were exactly what we needed. It's in a state park, wilderness area, so I was nervous about hacking the parts out of the wreck and carrying them out that day. So I actually went to the Forest Service and asked permission, which was probably a mistake, because they consider all those things artifacts in the Moose Creek area, and I wasn't able to get permission. I had these visions of hacksawing rusty airplane parts out of the wilderness and having Ranger Bob come up with a pair of handcuffs and hauling us off to jail. So I was kind of discouraged. So I went back to Skeeter Carlson, who owns the Jenny in the other hangar, and I was whining that, gee, we really needed this heavy streamlined tubing. As you know, all this tubing's made by the Summer mills in the south of the U.S., and they don't make this tubing anymore. And I got some bids to have this tubing extruded between $4,000 and $6,000, so that was prohibitive. So we'd kind of reserved the idea of making these gear legs out of round tube and putting fairings on them. And lo and behold, Skeeter Carlson says, well, I've got a set of Fairchild 71 wing struts that I salvaged from a wreck at Phelps Field in 1930. So we got to Skeeter's house, and lo and behold, he's got a set of struts, just like I tried to get out of Moose Creek, right here in my own backyard. And Skeeter gave us this material. Wednesday night. This is January 18. And Mr. Ingram, he's over here sanding parts for Randy, making cow flap adapters. We've got Andy Bradford over here. Andy, what are you building?
I don't know.
You have no idea. These are wing struts. He's hold the wings on. Very important, right?
Yeah.
Very good. So that's Andy. And then over here, we've got Ray. Ray, what are you building? Throttle linkage, right? And those are his parts there. We're going at it like crazy. Over here we got Randy Ingram. And Randy's building cow flaps adapters, right, Randy?
Betcha.
That's my thinking. And the date is
17.
18. 18.
18?
Yeah.
17.
There's that. And over here we got Ryan. And he's building the top cowl.
Trying. Keyword, trying.
Trying. Yeah, he's working on Mr. Wheel. And he's going to take it over to the Yoder for a minute and run it for just a second. Kind of see he can move a lot of material. The Yoder is a very quiet machine. That's the reason we like it a lot. And really works out nice.
For just a second.
And the Yoder locally works the material. And here's Ryan's going to work this thing. We got Wendy May. She made us a wonderful dinner tonight. Wendy May. Hi, Wendy. And there's Andy there. airplane weighs 4,080 pounds.
Okay, I can't wait any longer. I'm sorry. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Train 5820 Foxtrot, ground taxi as requested. Delta. Drifting right. Feet to Charlie. 17 inches, 80 miles an hour. We're indicating 70 even. 70 miles? That's affirmative. How's the attitude look? I like this for approach. You're pretty flat. Your nose is not too high. Let me try 75. What's this look like? Very little wiggle. A Boeing ground could have told you that. And I've got lots of trim left. No concerns on pitch or trim. Roger that. You're at definitely less than 2 degrees trim, and that looks like a good landing attitude. Okay, I'm at 43 for a simulated landing at 4,000. November 5839 across runway 2 and left, and give ground a call on 121.7. 0.7, thank you again. I think I'm gonna cry.
Did I seem scared?
It's cold.
I was kind of relaxed.